My wife started to justify her secret meetings with a colleague as friendship, but it soon became clear that it was an affair. I watched her cheating, tried to understand, forgive, save the family for the sake of the children, but the trust was completely destroyed. I don't know where to start, because until recently my life seemed pretty normal. I've been married for over 7 years. My wife and I have had almost no serious conflicts. We are raising 2 children, and everything seemed to be going on as usual. I can't say that our love was perfect, but it was stable and warm, the kind that gives a sense of security. And now I feel like I'm living in someone else's story, where the main character is some stranger, and I'm just watching. The problems started, as they usually do, gradually. At first they were small things. She started staying late at work, which used to be an extremely rare occurrence. At first I attributed it to projects, deadlines, stress. I tried to be supportive, asked if she needed help, but she always brushed it off, saying that it was just work-related issues. Then changes in communication at home began. She stopped sharing with me the events of the day, small joys or irritations that used to be usual. She became colder, but I justified it by fatigue, internal stress. One day when I was returning from work earlier than usual, I noticed that she was sitting in a strange position, almost hiding behind her laptop, and was clearly nervous. At first I thought it was some kind of work message and tried not to interfere. But later, when she went into the kitchen, she smiled so strangely that a chill ran down my spine. At that time, I could not yet understand that this was a harbinger of trouble. Gradually, I began to notice small, but increasingly obvious signs. The phone, which used to always lie on the table, was now with her all the time on vibration, and for some reason she always hid the screen when it called or a message came. Her mood changed dramatically after these calls or notifications, and sometimes she looked guilty, as if she was hiding something big. I tried to be careful not to pressure her, hoping that it was just work or friendly communication. The first time I asked her directly if she had someone at work, she laughed and said it was funny. She called her colleague just a friend, but I saw something else in her eyes. I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia, that I was too suspicious. She was always open, never gave me any reason to doubt, but the doubts grew anyway. There were a few times when I heard her laugh during a phone call or text message, and it was completely different from when we laughed together. It was more intimate, more personal. I tried to ignore it, explaining to myself that sometimes people find common ground at work and just enjoy the conversation. But with each passing day, these random signs became harder to ignore. One evening became a turning point. She said she would be late at work because they had an urgent presentation. I decided to surprise her and dropped by the office, officially, just to see how the preparations were going. I didn't think I'd see anything that would shatter my sense of reality, but that's exactly what happened. They were sitting too close in the conference room. He kept touching her arm, leaning in to whisper in her ear. They were laughing, exchanging glances that weren't exactly friendly. I froze, unsure of what to do. She saw me through the window and froze for a second, then just turned away as if I were invisible. After that night, we started having cold conversations. I tried to be open about what I'd noticed, how I felt that something was wrong. She'd say I was making it all up, that it was just friendship, and that I was being overly suspicious. She'd call it my paranoia, and that just made me even more fucking confused because I knew what I was seeing with my own eyes. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that it was just work and friendship. I watched her behavior, trying to figure out if there was a logical explanation. She still hid her phone, changed her routes home, laughed strangely on the phone. She talked about him a lot, always in a positive way, and I saw how she lit up when she talked about joint projects. There was something more than just professional interest shining through. And so a couple of months later, I accidentally noticed the correspondence on her phone when she left it on the table. I didn't want to see it, honestly. I thought I'd just pick up the phone and look at work messages. But there was a correspondence in which the words, "I want you," and "tonight" were repeated over and over. My heart stopped. It was a confirmation of what I already suspected, but reality still hit me with incredible force. She tried to justify it later. She said that it didn't mean anything, that it was a joke, that he was just a friend. But I saw their meetings, I saw the correspondence, I saw how she glowed next to him, and I realized this is no longer friendship. She is my person, my wife, and now she is a stranger to me. After I saw the correspondence, everything became unbearable. Every day turned into an intense struggle between the desire to break everything off right now and the fear of destroying the family. I tried to act normal, but inside I was burning. I noticed how she was becoming more and more distant, although she tried not to show it too obviously. It felt like I no longer knew the person I had lived with for so many years. I tried to find answers. At first I talked to my friends, but no one could understand the depth of my feelings. Maybe it's just flirting, they said, and I tried to believe them, but my heart refused. I even tried to convince myself that it really was nothing serious, that she was just emotionally dependent on the attention of another man. But every time she smiled when she mentioned his name, it felt like a knife in my chest. I started looking for moments to observe her, but that turned out to be even worse. I saw how she checked her phone in the middle of the night, how quickly she put the screen away when she heard my step. I saw how she arranged meetings that she didn't tell me anything about. And every time I saw these little signs, the internal tension became unbearable. It felt like the house that used to be my refuge had become a trap. One day I decided that I just needed to ask her directly, even though I knew it would lead to an explosion. I said that I wanted to know the truth, that I had seen the correspondence, that I could no longer live in uncertainty. She froze, looked at me for a long time, and finally said that it was all an accident, that she had simply become emotionally attached, that it didn't mean anything. She used words that would have comforted me before, but now they sounded like a criminal's excuse trying to justify the obvious. After that conversation, I began to notice that her excuses were becoming more and more artificial. She stopped hiding her emotions when she communicated with him, but at the same time she tried to keep her distance from me. I saw how she looked for moments to be near him, how she laughed at his jokes, how her eyes lit up when he was around, and when I was around, it was as if something inside went out. I tried to talk to her again, but every conversation turned into a cycle of accusations and excuses. She said I was jealous, that I didn't trust her, that it was just work, that she hadn't left me, that she loved me. But I saw the truth in the little things, in the way she hid her phone, in the way she responded to his messages, in the way she suddenly laughed when I approached. It was a strange feeling. On the one hand, I still loved her. On the other, I couldn't forgive her betrayal, even if she claimed it was just emotions. Every day I tried to understand why this was happening, how it was possible to combine love and betrayal in one person. Sometimes it seemed to me that this was some kind of mental test where I was constantly losing. I started looking for evidence, not to punish her, but to understand if there was a chance to restore trust. I started checking her social media, noticed that he liked almost everything she posted. They corresponded in chats where I couldn't look, but it was obvious that this was not the usual communication of colleagues. It was an emotional connection that could not be called friendship. In the midst of all this, I tried to maintain the appearance of normalcy. We went to the park with the kids. I tried to act like everything was normal, but every day at home was full of tension. I saw how she carefully avoided talking about me and our future, as if she was afraid to reveal her true feelings. And I felt that time was working against me. The longer this went on, the harder it was to fix the situation, the harder it was to find a way to trust. One day I saw her texting him right in the hallway before leaving for work. For a second her eyes met mine. I saw a mixture of fear and guilt. But when I tried to talk to her about it, she again said that it meant nothing, that he was just a friend. And at that moment I realized, for her this is no longer a secret, it is a new world in which I am no longer the main character. That same day I realized that I had to make a decision, continue to live in an illusion, pretend that nothing was happening, or break this vicious circle, even if it would destroy the family. I didn't know what to do because my love for her still lived inside me, but the betrayal left a wound that was impossible to ignore. I understood that if I did nothing, it would destroy me from the inside, but the thought of divorce, of destroying the family, of how the children would suffer, was excruciating. I felt like I was on the edge of an abyss, where every step forward or back could turn into a catastrophe. And that's how I woke up every morning, with thoughts of her, of him, of the family, of what once seemed stable and eternal. And now all I can do is watch someone else's story, where my wife is no longer the one I loved. A few days after I realized everything, I decided to act differently. I didn't want to live in constant anticipation of new signs of betrayal, in constant fear of seeing something that would break my heart even more. I began to watch not to prove her betrayal to myself, but to understand how we could at least talk openly. But every time I tried to start a conversation, she would go off topic or just ignore me. Then what I feared most happened. She invited him to our house, supposedly to discuss work. I came home earlier than she expected and found them in the kitchen. They were sitting too close, he was holding her hand, and she was smiling in a way she had never smiled at me. My heart sank, my breath caught, and I felt that at that moment something in my world was finally breaking. She noticed me immediately, but she didn't get confused. Her gaze was calm, as if she was waiting for me to appear, and that was the scariest thing. I tried to speak, tried to ask directly, but the words stuck in my throat. She said again that he was just a friend, that I was exaggerating, that I was too jealous. But her actions said something else. I saw it, I felt it. After that, I stopped trying to hide my emotions. I told her directly that I knew about the correspondence, about the meetings, about the touching, that she was actually hiding me from him. She was silent, trying to find an excuse, but her eyes gave away the whole truth. I saw how inside her there was a struggle between what she was doing and what she knew, what I saw. The next day, I decided that something needed to change. I began to look for an opportunity to talk to her calmly, without shouting, without accusations. I understood that if we wanted to save at least something from our family, we needed to at least try to understand why this happened, what made her look for someone else. But she didn't want to hear. Every time I tried to ask a question, she avoided the answer, accused me of injustice, of paranoia, of mistrust. Things got even worse when I saw her planning meetings with him outside of work. I accidentally noticed their correspondence on her phone calendar. "I'm free tonight," and it wasn't a work meeting. I felt that everything was falling apart completely, that every day, every minute when she was around was becoming a lie. At some point, I realized that I couldn't live in this state any longer. I started thinking about divorce, about how to protect myself and the children, how to preserve my self-esteem. But every time I looked at her, at our children, at the familiar things in the house, something inside me resisted. I loved her. I still loved her, despite the betrayal. And then one evening, when the children were sleeping, I made up my mind. I sat down opposite her and said that I knew everything. I said that I saw her emotions, her meetings, her correspondence. I said that it hurt me and that I could no longer live in this illusion. This time she fell silent. I saw something change inside her. She cried, openly for the first time, without excuses, without the words, "It's just friendship." She confessed that it was an affair, that she had feelings for him, that she couldn't stop herself. The words I had heard before were now empty excuses, and the real truth sounded so bitter that I felt like I had been slapped in the face. I tried to figure out how we could move on, how to save the family, but she said that she was no longer sure of her feelings for me. After that, the conversation ended in silence. We both understood that the old life was gone. She went into another room, and I was left alone, with a feeling of emptiness. I looked at the walls, at the photos, at our memories, and I couldn't believe that it could all disappear so quickly. Everything that was stable and familiar collapsed, and I didn't know where to go next. The next days were full of tension. We tried to act normal for the sake of the children, but every look, every word reminded me of betrayal. I saw how she tried to be normal, but it was artificial. I was trying to figure out what to do next, forgive her and try to restore trust, or break up to keep the last of my respect and not destroy myself completely. I began to notice that my thoughts were increasingly returning to the moments when she was happy with him, to the correspondence, to her secrets. I understood that inside I was torn between love and pain, between the desire to save the family and the understanding that trust was broken. Every day was like a step on thin ice, one wrong step, and everything could collapse completely. And now, sitting alone, I understand that I am at a crossroads. I still love her, I still want to save the family, but I don't know if I have enough strength to survive this betrayal. And I understand that if we want to move on, we will have to do the impossible, tell the truth, face pain, and make decisions that can change life forever. After that confession, everything changed. The first days after the frank conversation were filled with silence. We both understood that our old life was gone. She walked around the house like a shadow, and I was like a person who had lost my bearings. The children sensed that something was going on between us, but they didn't understand the essence. I tried to behave as calmly as possible, but her every glance, every smile seemed like a deception to me. I began to record everything that was happening. When she went to work, I saw how she checked her phone more often than usual, how nervously she reacted to calls. Every time she talked about him or about work where he was present, I felt a chill in my chest. Everything inside me was fighting. On the one hand, love for my wife and the desire to save the family for the sake of the children. On the other, the awareness of betrayal and the inability to trust her completely. We tried to talk, to discuss what to do next, but each conversation turned into a whirlwind of emotions and accusations. She asked for forgiveness, said that it was a mistake, that she did not want to lose her family, that she felt guilty. But words couldn't restore trust. couldn't erase the picture of their closeness that I saw with my own eyes. I began to notice how her habits were gradually changing. She tried to be more attentive to me, sometimes initiated time together with the children, but I saw these actions as an effort, not a natural manifestation of feelings. This effort seemed to be intended more to make amends than to truly restore the relationship, and this feeling made me even more cautious, even more withdrawn. A few weeks passed, and the situation reached a point where we had to make a decision about the future. We understood that it was impossible to live in a state of constant tension, that we needed to decide whether we wanted to try to restore trust, or whether this was the path to an inevitable separation. She said that she wanted to try, that she loved me and the children, that she was ready to work on herself and on our relationship. I listened to her, but inside me a hurricane of emotions raged. Pain, anger, disappointment, love, everything mixed into one huge ball that was impossible to untangle. I decided that I needed to create a safe space first. We agreed to go to counseling together to figure out how to move forward. This decision gave me a sense of control and hope, but at the same time I understood that this was only the beginning of a long journey. I couldn't forget what had happened, and I knew that trust doesn't rebuild instantly. Internally, I tried to analyze my feelings. I realized that I loved her, but now my love was intertwined with caution. Every gesture, every smile of hers was a test, a signal that I was trying to decipher. I became more attentive to myself, to my boundaries, to what I could forgive and what I couldn't. It was painful, but necessary, so as not to lose myself in an attempt to save the family. Over time, I began to notice small changes in her behavior. She tried to be honest, didn't hide her phone number, shared little things that she had previously hidden. It was little, but enough for me to see that she was truly ready to work on the relationship. A spark of hope was ignited inside me again, but I knew, trust does not return instantly, and every day we will face trials. Children became the main motivator. I understood that regardless of our relationship, we must maintain stability for them. I began to spend more time with them, trying to be attentive, caring, showing them that family can be a support, even if adults make mistakes. This helped me maintain a sense of myself, not completely dissolving in pain and betrayal. Now I am in a state where every day is a step into the unknown. Sometimes I want to close myself off and leave everything, sometimes to forgive and try to restore what was destroyed. I understand that the path is long and painful, that no words will bring back the past, that trust is built slowly. But I also know that love can be a force that allows you to overcome difficulties if both are ready to work on yourself and on the relationship. And this is how we live on. I see her efforts, I see her mistakes, I see her choice, and I make my choice every day. To stay, to fight for the family, for the children, for the opportunity to restore at least part of what was. It is not easy, it is painful, but this is our reality. And I understand that only through honesty, openness, and joint work can we try to emerge from this crisis stronger than we were before. Now I know one thing, life will never be the same, trust will not return completely, but we have a chance to create a new dynamic, new rules, and new closeness. It is not easy, it is hard, but I am ready to fight for it, because love and family are what are worth the pain and trials. What has been happening in recent weeks has turned into a real hell. Every day was like a step on a thin edge. I did not know what would happen next, when she would return from work, what she would say, how she would look at me. On the one hand, she tried to behave as before, but these attempts looked artificial, forced. On the other hand, I saw every detail, every movement, every look that spoke louder than words. One evening I stayed at work longer than usual, and when I returned home, she was already waiting for me in the kitchen. But instead of the usual greeting, I heard laughter that I had never heard from her in such an intonation before. It was light, playful, almost intimate. My heart sank when I realized that she had been texting him again while I was away. The phone was lying on the table, and it disappeared in her hands as soon as I came closer. I felt something breaking inside me. Everything I had tried to suppress, pain, jealousy, anger, came pouring out. I didn't scream, I didn't pound my fists on the table, but there was a storm inside me that couldn't be stopped. I told her straight out that I knew about the text messages, that I saw her changes, that I couldn't pretend that everything was okay anymore. She looked at me with surprise, as if she hadn't expected such a reaction. And then the real confrontation began. She said that it doesn't matter, that it was just emotions, that I was too suspicious. But I could see from her eyes and movements that it was a lie. I saw her tension when she tried to avoid the topic. I saw how her voice trembled when she talked about him. I tried to stay calm, but her every gesture, every word caused a new wave of pain and anger in me. We hardly slept that night. I was sitting in the living room and she was in another room. I could hear her quietly talking to him on the phone, laughing, whispering words that weren't meant for me. I understood that this betrayal was not only physical, but also emotional. And then a feeling of complete helplessness arose inside me. I loved her, but she was somewhere else with another person, in a world where I was not allowed. The next day, the tension turned into obvious conflicts. I began to notice that her every move was a test of me, a provocation. She left the house under various pretexts, returned later than she had promised. I asked questions, tried to understand what was going on, and she answered barely audibly, with a smile that only fueled my rage. I saw that she was enjoying the attention, that she was pleased, that she again felt in control of the situation, and I was just an observer, a prisoner of my own pain. In parallel with this, I tried to maintain the appearance of a normal life for the children. But every conversation, every little thing at home was filled with tension. She skillfully masked her emotions, but I read between the lines. Even when she fed the children, when she put them to bed, her thoughts were somewhere else, and it tore me apart. I began to notice a dangerous habit in myself, to follow her, eavesdrop on her calls, check her messages. This gave a short-term sense of control, but increased the internal pain. I saw that she felt it, and her behavior became even more playful and provocative. It seemed that she was almost deliberately testing my boundaries, as if she enjoyed the power she had over me through her betrayal. One evening, I entered the room where she was sitting with the phone. I demanded that she show me the correspondence. At first she denied it, then irritably said that it did not matter, that I do not understand the relationships of adults. I felt that the last thread of calm was breaking inside me. I screamed, I tried to make her look me in the eyes, I tried to get through to the truth. She remained cold, smiling through irritation and fear at the same time. The hardest moment came when I noticed that she was planning to meet him for the weekend. I went up to her, tried to explain that it was impossible, that I couldn't stand it anymore. She looked at me straight, her eyes burning with determination, but also with some hidden guilt. I felt a mixture of rage and helplessness that drove me to the limit. We screamed, blamed each other, remembered past mistakes, past feelings, but nothing subsided. So many emotions were boiling inside me that I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything except her and him. I saw how she gradually moved away from me and closer to him. I saw her smiles, her touches to the phone, her looks into the void when she thinks about him. And I realized, if I don't make a decision now, I will lose myself completely. But despite all the pain, love still remained. I loved her, and this made the situation even more unbearable. I tried to understand how it is possible to love a person who causes such pain, and at the same time be afraid of losing him. I felt like I was on the edge of an abyss. One wrong step and everything will collapse completely, but it was also impossible to stay in this chaos any longer. Every day turned into a test, who would win, her or my inner fortitude. I saw that she was balancing between me and him, and it gave me a sense of control and at the same time burned my soul. I understood. This is the peak moment, the height of this whole story, when emotions are at their limit, and any mistake can break everything, finally and irrevocably. And now I am sitting alone, trying to breathe, trying to keep my mind, while she is somewhere out there, planning new meetings, continuing to play between me and him. A storm is raging inside me. Love, jealousy, pain, anger, fear, everything is mixed into one continuous pain. I understand that this height is not the end yet, that there will be decisions, choices, clashes with reality ahead. But right now I live in this chaos, this fire that burns from within, and I understand that peace is still far away. The last few days turned into a series of empty minutes and long, meaningless conversations with myself, or rather with the one who was still inside me. I tried to figure out how to live on, but every time I thought about the future, I felt only emptiness. The children laughed, played, and I sat in the shadows, watched them and felt like a stranger in my own home. I didn't know how to be a father and at the same time a person who was losing the most precious thing he had. She walked next to me, but I couldn't see in her the woman I loved. Her eyes sometimes met mine, but there was no warmth there. There was something else, distance, slight hostility, or just emptiness. Sometimes it seemed that she was there only because we lived under the same roof, and not because she loved. And this feeling slowly ate away at me from the inside. I tried to talk to her, tried to understand if there was any point in continuing, but her answers became monosyllabic, distant. She said that it's complicated, that she doesn't want to lose her family because of her mistakes, but there was no emotion in her words, no real sincerity. I saw how her thoughts were occupied with someone else, how she waited for messages, calls, meetings. Every action of hers seemed to be part of another world in which I no longer existed. At night, I sat alone on the couch, listening to the silence, and it was deafening. I remembered the moments when we were happy, when we laughed together, when we felt like we were a team. And I understood that all this was in the past, that now these memories only hit my heart painfully, showing that there was no real happiness anymore. I tried to find an excuse to tell myself that everything could be restored, that love was stronger than betrayal. But the more I tried, the clearer I saw the truth. Trust was broken, and it would never be the same. We began to live like neighbors, not like spouses. The children asked questions that I couldn't answer honestly. I didn't want to ruin their childhood, but I couldn't lie either. Every time I saw their smiles, I felt a double grief. On the one hand, joy for them; on the other, the understanding that my mother and I were no longer one, that they were growing up in a house where the love between their parents had died. She sometimes tried to make a step forward, but these were only empty gestures. Flowers, words of sorry, attempts to talk, none of this touched my heart, because inside me there was already a gaping emptiness. I understood that her presence next to me no longer healed, but only reminded me of the pain, that she could have chosen someone else, and that I was no longer the main person in her life. Every evening was like a quiet, slow death. I watched her go to her room, take the phone, talk to it, laugh. And I stay in the living room, trying to breathe, trying to live, but the feeling of betrayal and disappointment squeezes my chest so much that sometimes it seems like I won't be able to breathe. I don't scream, I don't make scenes, because everything inside has turned into a sick apathy, the realization that I am no longer needed, that the love for which I lived has turned into an illusion. Even trying to find myself outside the relationship didn't help. Friends, work, walks with the children, all of it seemed grey, lifeless, empty. I felt like a person without a future, a person who had lost support. Every time I looked at her, my heart broke. She was near, but she was no longer mine. Sometimes I caught myself wanting to leave, run away, start life anew, but thoughts about the children stopped me. I understood that for their sake I would have to stay here in this ghost house where love had died, where every day was a reminder that there would be no happy future. And this thought was the most pressing, to stay so as not to ruin their lives, and at the same time live in a world where your wife loves someone else. I tried to sleep, but every movement, every sound in the house made me wary. Every word she said, every laugh with another person, I heard in my head, reliving it, experiencing the pain over and over again. I began to doubt that I would ever be able to feel trust or joy. It seemed that life had turned into an endless wait for the pain that it inevitably brings. And now I sit alone in the middle of a quiet house, listening to her laugh with someone else, and I understand that this is not my life anymore. This is someone else's happiness, someone else's emotions, someone else's love. I remained only an observer, a person who once loved with all his heart and is now forced to live with this disappointment, with this emptiness inside. Every morning is a reminder that love can be destroyed in a matter of months, that trust can be lost forever, that the happiness for which you lived can turn into pain and emptiness. And there is no way to fix it. There is no turning back. There is no strength to fight what is no longer controllable. I stay here because there is no other choice. Love is gone, trust is destroyed, there is no more happiness. There is only silence, emptiness and pain that is impossible to forget. And every day I look at her, at the house, at the children, and I understand. Life goes on, but I am no longer the person I was before. This week was the final point for me. I understood that there was no return to the old life, to the old feelings, to the old we. Every day was like a step through an empty house, where the echo of our memories pressed harder than the silence. She was there, but she was no longer the woman I had lived with all these years. Her every look, every smile, every gesture said, "I am no longer yours." I tried to fight, tried to talk, tried to find at least something that would allow me to preserve the remains of our family, but everything was in vain. She no longer hid her feelings, no longer tried to hide her communication with him. Sometimes she pretended to care, but these were rare and empty gestures that only intensified my pain. I saw that she was completely devoted to another, and every touch she made of me was a reminder that I was now a stranger in my own home. The children witnessed the tension that could not be hidden. They did not understand the essence of what was happening, but they felt the cold that had settled between us. Sometimes I caught myself talking to them not as a father, but as a person trying to survive in the ruins. Their laughter, once joyful, now seemed alien to me, like an echo of someone else's life. I tried to be close, But even in these attempts, I felt how the growing alienation made me weak, almost transparent. Every evening turned into torture. She went to her room, took the phone, texted, or just sat in silence. I heard her laugh with him, quiet whispers, and every sound tore me apart. I tried to hide my feelings, tried not to react, but everything inside was burning. It felt like my heart was being torn into 1,000 pieces, and no amount of effort could stitch it back together. I couldn't make excuses anymore. I couldn't trust words anymore. All that was left was emptiness. I saw her choice, I saw her affection for another, and I understood that I had no choice but to watch this destruction. She was no longer my wife, but a stranger under one roof, and every attempt to return something was just an illusion. Sometimes I caught myself wanting to leave, to give up everything and start life anew, but thoughts about the children stopped me. I understood that I couldn't destroy their world completely, that they were still too young to understand why parents no longer loved each other. And this kept me here in this ghost house, where every day was torture, where love had died and trust would never return. I tried to distract myself with work, friends, household chores, but everything seemed meaningless. Even success at work did not bring joy. Even conversations with friends could not drown out the inner emptiness. I felt like a man without a future, a man who was betrayed in the most cruel way. I was here physically, but my soul had long since left. One day I watched her laughing on the phone, and for the first time I finally realized, I don't mean anything anymore. I tried to remember how it was before, her smile for me, her attention, our conversations until late at night, our walks together. But all of this turned into someone else's memories, into pictures that can't be returned. I tried to find comfort, but I understood that there was no such comfort. We continued to live under the same roof, but it was not life. It was an imitation, a performance that no one wants to watch except ourselves, so that the children could see at least the appearance of normality. But behind this appearance there was nothing, no love, no trust, no happiness. Only emptiness, coldness, and an endless sense of loss. Sometimes I looked at the children and felt that they were the only thing keeping me here. But even this feeling did not give me joy. I understood that their happiness was partly built on a lie, on the illusion of a family that had died long ago. And every time I realized this, a feeling of helplessness and despair grew inside me. I tried to talk to her, tried to find something again that would give me hope, but it was impossible. Any conversation ended in emptiness, mistrust, irritation. I saw how she was looking for emotions that were not in me, and I understood that I could no longer give her what she was looking for. And this understanding killed me more than any betrayal. There was only pain left inside me, pain that does not go away, that cannot be cured, that becomes a part of you. Love, trust, years together, all this now seems like a dream, an illusion that I once considered reality. I tried to live, tried to breathe, tried to find meaning, but every day reminded me that everything was lost. And now I sit in an empty living room, I hear her laugh with someone else, I hear our house filling with other people's emotions, and I finally understand. The past is dead, there is no present, there is no future for us anymore. I am left alone among the ruins of love, trust, and hope. I know only one thing: this story is over. Not with a happy ending, not with forgiveness, not with a chance. It ended in emptiness, pain, and the final destruction of what was once called a family. I stay here in this house, among children's toys, empty words, and other people's laughter. I live only because there is no other way out. And every day it reminds me that sometimes love can die forever, that trust can never be restored, that happiness can be lost forever.